Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for being in this breakout session on suffering. I always wonder what possesses someone to come to a breakout on suffering. I think either you have suffered, are suffering, want to help people who are suffering, but probably no one came in here going, I hope I get to suffer, and this will help me get ready for it. But this is an opportunity, we hope, to prepare you for what in this life is the inevitable. You will suffer. You just are going to have that as part of your journey. So we're going to pray in just a minute. I want to give just another minute for people to come in and find their way. But I'm Scott Cannell. I'm the pastor of music and worship here. This is my wife, Mary, and we've been married for it'll be 25 years this August. We have 7 children. That's not where the suffering comes from. That's actually one of the great blessings of our life. Of course, when you have 7 children, there's opportunities for suffering to enter through what's going on in their lives. But we have 7 children. 6 of them are boys and 1 girl. They range in age from 13 to 23. So our season of parenting is shifting dramatically to the launching period where we're watching them go and establish lives on their own, even while we have several in our house. So that's kind of where we are. We will tell a few more stories in a moment just about suffering and how it has impacted our life in particular seasons. But let's pray and ask the Lord to give us all that He has for us today. And then, of course, as you have questions, please interact with us as we talk. Father, thank you so much for your faithful hand upon our lives. And thank you so much for the gift that it is to share life with one another, life with those who know you, seasons of life with those who are ahead of you, so that they've been through a path that when you enter it, they remember it and know what it entails and can help you. I pray that the outcome of this next hour will be the ability to share with others who will suffer some helpful principles from your word that will bless and encourage and direct and sometimes just comfort and give hope when all seems lost. We thank you that in Christ is our hope in both life and death. And it's in His name we pray. Amen. All right, then I'll try to speak super loud so you can get me at my loudest. Thank you for being here. So as I said, we've been married for almost 25 years. Before we got married, Mary's mom came to me in a sort of an informal way off to the side, but it seemed like it was at a family event or something, and said in sort of a way that she speaks in, hey, I hope you're ready to suffer. And I was kind of taken aback by that.
I actually just found out the story about 2 months ago. So we've been married almost 25 years, and I did not know this, okay? This was like the secret conversation.
I pondered this in my heart and kept it to myself. But I was sort of taken aback by that, and I didn't know what to say. And she said, because Mary's life has been filled with suffering, and now you're entering into that. So maybe just talk about how your life before you even met me was marked by.
So I tell this little blip. By the time I was 10 years old, my life had been threatened twice. I spent my Saturdays visiting my oldest brother in prison. Our house had been burnt down. Our neighbor's house was burnt down by my brother. We had been on the Channel 2 news a couple times. Like I saw it, like I was at a friend's house when I was like 7. And that was just by the time I was 10 years old. And it was all as a result of someone else, not me or not just circumstances, someone else's sin. But it was that's how my life started.
Mary is one of 4 siblings, all 3 of whom had deceased at a premature age. Her dad also passed away early, if you will, with cancer. And so just marked by lots of loss. So when we got together, and of course her mom said that, I understood a little bit then and understood much more later that for whatever reason, her family had just had a seemingly inordinate amount of suffering. Now, we spent about the first 10 years of our life, our married life, having children and kind of experiencing momentary startles or scares, but generally just growing and adding to our family and advancing in career and ministry, and it seemed like the Lord was giving us just a wonderful start. And then we reached a point about 12 years into marriage where we had hit a really difficult spot in ministry. I was a pastor at the time, was not in music ministry, and the pastorate that I was serving in really sort of ground to a halt. It was clear to me that things weren't going well in the church, and that I was going to need to find another place to serve. I won't go through those details, but it was reaching the point where animosity amongst leadership figures was becoming difficult to bear. And that created the first real sense of demoralizing crisis in our life. What's going on here, Lord? You have given us seemingly a happy existence, and now this looks very uncertain. I was without the prospects of a job, and was trying to figure out what the next step was. It led to a really difficult time for me, but in general, that suffering through kind of ministry crisis and job crisis, obviously that affects this. And a lot of people do experience those kind of crises. We moved to Louisville, Kentucky in 2010, where I was the new professor of worship at Southern Seminary. It's a remarkable save from what looked like a demoralizing fail, and just the kindness of God. It looked like we had weathered one of the greatest challenges of our marriage, and we're headed into a brand new chapter with blue skies. And
so at the time, Stephen Curtis Chapman's album came out after they had lost their daughter, and I don't know, it was like songs of lament and songs of hope, and I think I listened to that album a million times. I just listened to it over and over again, and one of the songs had "Spring is Coming." In other words, we've had the winter and spring is coming. And so Scott, when he got the job at Southern, he was like, spring is coming. Spring is coming for our family. Spring is coming. Spring is coming. In fact, the screensaver, back when you did screensavers on the computers, that's how long ago it was, it said spring is coming. And so we moved to Louisville. We bought a house with our kids. Now it's the first time I'd ever left Maryland, other than living in Africa for a while. But so there was sadness of that, but there was also like this just great hope that spring was coming.
Yeah, that seemed like that was it. We were going to live a charmed existence as a poorly paid seminary professor and raise our now 7 kids, ages 1 to 10, basically, 1 to 11, in a new place. We arrived in September of 2010, a little bit after the semester began because of the way the hiring process went. So we had a pretty easy first semester as I got acclimated to the new teaching routine and just what it was to be a college professor. And then we hit an abrupt wall in the week of Thanksgiving. So that was really where you...
So I had been running. I ran a lot, and I had been running, and I was taking a shower, and I felt a lump in my left breast. And I was still weaning our baby, so it just didn't seem like anything. I mean, I was 34 years old. There's no way, right? There's no way. And it just wasn't even on the radar. I didn't even tell Scott about it, I think, for 3 weeks. I think I found it in like the beginning of October or something. And so we'd been there a month. And we went back to Maryland which is where I'm from, for Thanksgiving. He had a business trip in Boston, and I was at my mom's with our kids. And I went to see one of my naturopath doctors that that I would see when I was in Maryland. I just kind of casually said, I found a lump, and I think it's my hormones. That's what I said, whatever. And he left, and he opened the door, and he's like, this is totally serious, and you need to go have a mammogram. And I was like, okay. So literally, through a course of events, I ended up having a mammogram there and a biopsy all within like a day and a half, like 2 days. And but when they did the mammogram, and I was alone because he was with the kids, he had come back from his trip and he was with the kids, and when they did the mammogram and then the ultrasound, the doctor looked at me and he's like, okay, Mrs. Cannell, I am 99% sure this is breast cancer. And I was like, you're joking, right? Anyway, and so then I had went to have the biopsy the very next day, which was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And literally the doctor said, don't get your hopes up. He had real good bedside manner. He's like, don't get your hopes up. He's like, this is cancer. And so we got the call Friday after
so Thanksgiving was the day between that conversation and when the results would come.
Right.
Which you can imagine was
We
a
already
wonderful
knew,
Thanksgiving.
right.
Yeah.
It was great. It was real great.
So we are crammed in to her mom's house, which is a 3-bedroom house with the 9 of us plus her.
Plus the dog and the hamsters.
Yeah. You have a lot of kids, you have a lot of pets. And so I just remember that day being one of just incredible, this giant cloud, this dark cloud had just come in over our life. And even the screensaver "Spring is Coming" was not dissipating the cloud. And so, of course, Friday, we got the confirmation that indeed was cancer. We did what a lot of people do when you get that diagnosis. We started Googling, what does it mean? And of course, everything that comes up is terrible. And so this began the season, a lengthy season, of me trying to approximate what raising 7 children alone is going to look like, which no good outcomes would be there in my wildest imagination. We got a couple of consultant trips, one to Johns Hopkins, because she was from Maryland, and then one to the local University of Louisville medical facilities, and decided that treatment would take place in Louisville. And that whole year of 2011 was just surgeries.
There was no spring.
Yeah, there was no spring. There was no spring. It was surgeries and chemotherapy and more surgeries, and it's a blur. I don't remember much of the calendar year 2011, the academic year 11 and 12. By God's grace, we stumbled through it. We won't go through the specific details of some of the things that happened, but in 2012, we thought we were clear.
Yeah, spring was coming, right?
Spring was coming.
And I found another lump. And my doctors assured me that it was fat necrosis, or it was scar tissue, or it was whatever. I had already had, we've been very aggressive because it was a very aggressive cancer. Because what they don't tell you is when you're diagnosed under the age of 50, breast cancer, because survival is only 5 years. So when they say your survival rate is 50%, they're only giving you a 5-year, 50% chance in 5 years you'll survive. That's not very good. And so we did all the chemo, bilateral mastectomy, the entire thing, just like protocol. And I found a lump, and they just were like, it's not this. There's no way it's this. And I was like, you want to bet? You don't know me. Like, you don't know me. And the Lord likes me in the valley. And we found out right before my 36th birthday, I think, that it was back, that it was a recurrence. And so we started the process again of more surgeries, of chemo again, the whole thing.
Yeah, and on top of that, children had some really difficult sicknesses that ended us in the PICU with 2 of them. Our oldest son ended up there with just an unexplained illness that they never really could diagnose, but eventually he recovered. And then within a month or so, our daughter, the girl, ended up there with really serious pneumonia. And this is an incredible woman, as you already know, but one of the things that I did through all the pregnancies was watch monitors and gauges. That's how I think. I'm listening to beeps and watching numbers, and when Grace was in there and those numbers were related to her ability to breathe, it just was absolutely devastating for me. Now, she was going through chemo, and the last place she needed to be was in a PICU, where germs are abundant. And so I went the first night and didn't sleep because I was watching all these things. Just a little backstory, when Mary got sick the first time, she told me, please promise me 2 things that will absolutely be certain. One is I was in the PhD program to keep my job as a teacher, and she said, never miss it. Don't stop doing the PhD. Okay? Don't stop going for the PhD. And then the second, she said, don't miss a day of work. Would you please promise me those 2 things? And I said, well, how do I know that I can promise me those 2 things? If I can do chemo, you can read books and write papers. And well, I can't argue with that, absolutely. Okay, well, so the next day, so getting back to Grace in the hospital, I was supposed to go to work the next day. And she told me she was coming to the hospital to be with Grace. And I said, no, you're not. You're not. I don't need another crisis right now. And she said, you were going to work, and I'm going to be with Grace.
You should have seen those nurses when I walked in bald on the PICU floor and my kids got pneumonia. It was nuts. She's like, they're like, you shouldn't be here. I was like, yeah, you tried to stop me. I already talked to my doctors. My counts are okay right now because I was in the cycle where you're coming, like you're not in the low part of the cycle. I was in the high part of the cycle. And I was like, there is no way. And because he's got to go to work and he can't sleep here. And this is the way it's going to go. And you have to remember, when we moved to Louisville, we had 0 family and 0 friends. So I was diagnosed literally 8 weeks after we got there. And we still had, we didn't have anyone. Like we had friends from Maryland who would fly in every 3 weeks during my cycle, my chemo cycle, and stay that first week when I was so sick I couldn't function. And I just think, you know what, pray that God gives you friends like that in your life, because they would, literally leave their life and come in and take care of my children when I couldn't. And it was such a beautiful, wonderful thing. I didn't get to enjoy them being there, but I knew my children were being taken care of, which was really, really good. But it also meant that I had to be okay basically 95% of the time, because they'd come in for 5 days or 4 days or whatever, and then that meant that I had to push and drive and function, like make myself. And I think about that sometimes, and I think I would get grumpy about it, especially after the second diagnosis sometimes, because I was like, I just don't want to have to keep pushing. But I think it was a good thing. I really do. I think it helped me keep going because I had to, and it was good.
Top of all of this that was going on through these first couple of years, I mentioned being a poorly paid seminary professor. We were failing financially.
We were broke.
Broke would have been an upgrade. We had nothing.
Well, that's not true. We had a house.
We had a house.
We
weren't living in the river.
We had kids.
In a van down by the river.
We had cars.
We did. That's true. But as happens when medical bills come in and you're trying to juggle these things and you're using credit cards to try to figure out how to feed the kids, and they get maxed out, and then you reach the point where there's no more credit limit, and you drain the bank account and you just live from paycheck to paycheck. As it happened when Grace was in the hospital for pneumonia, we were down to 61 cents. 11 cents. I was a little more optimistic than I remember. 11 cents in our checking account, and nothing to feed the kids that night with when I was going to go home. And so I left the hospital when Mary came down, pushing herself into duty. And I walked down where the van was parked on the sidewalk, and I was really losing it. And I was really frustrated. I thought, Lord, I'm trying to serve you. I'm just trying to do this well. My whole life I just tried to just be what I thought you wanted me to be. And I don't understand how this is supposed to work. I don't understand what's going to happen. I don't know if my daughter is going to make it. They had told us that she was their chief concern on the floor that night. I don't know if my wife is going to make it. I don't know what I'm going to feed my kids when I get home. I don't know what you're doing, and I don't know how to take the next step. And I stood there outside the van. I get ready to get back in to go home, And he said, I'm not getting in this van until I figure out what you're doing and how it's supposed to work. And he didn't give me much, but what he did give me was, I'm not going to give any promises about what's going to happen when you get home. I'm just going to promise that I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be with you. And I got back in the van and rode home with Jesus. Tried to figure out what we were going to feed the kids that night for supper. And go ahead.
There was a check for $1,000 in the mailbox that night from someone that we had never met and didn't know. And so he told the story before, and he left it hanging at 11 cents. And literally weeks went by, and they're like, "What did you do?" Like, there was actually a check. It was remarkable.
I have to fill in the rest of the story.
Yes.
Jesus was not only with me, but he had money in the mailbox. So I wanted to use that as kind of the foundation for where we want to share these principles that we feel Scripture advances, and then we'll just draw from our experiences, because clearly these are not just incidents that happen to individuals, but they affect marriages. So the first of these 5 principles, 6 principles or so that we've put here is suffering is for the faithful. In fact, it's an expected part of what it is to live the Christian life. Look at the verse at the end of that top section in 1 Peter 4:12. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. So suffering is an expected part of this life to follow Christ. It's part of what it means to take up your cross, denying yourself, take up your cross and follow him. James says, consider it joy when suffering enters, when trials come. And there are 2 products of suffering that I think are really enhanced because of the suffering. One is the eternal character of Christ that's being conformed within us, and then along with that, from 2 Peter, I draw from the intensely sanctifying effect of suffering. So I said suffering intensely sanctifies because it is an intense period of time, but it also sanctifies intensely. There's enormous growth from suffering. You are not the same person coming out of suffering that you are going into it.
I used to say that I must have a lot of sin, like in the sense of like, I would say to the Lord, would I not trust you? Would I not trust you if I lived my life on the mountain? I have friends who live their lives on the mountaintops. They're like, I say my best friend is like Mary Poppins. Like, the worst thing in her life just took a spoonful of sugar to go down. And I mean that. It really is. Like, her husband gets the best jobs. She's got 4 kids. They love Jesus. They marry kids that love Jesus. Like, every time, it looks like it's going to be bad. It never is. And she just like skips from mountain to mountain to mountain, and she loves Jesus. She does. And I am like in the valley, and I just stay there. So like, I'm Job, and she gets to be Mary Poppins. And I would say to the Lord, this is it. This is what I need. Like, I just believe that when you are having hard things, I think the sin is just being pulled out, and the sin is being crushed and pulled out, and I think that the Lord sanctifies you in such an intense way. And I would say to the Lord, would I not trust you if I was Mary Poppins? You know me. Would I not? Because I'll tell you what, in the valley, I told Scott this the other day, I feel when suffering happens, it almost brings me comfort. Is that terrible? Like, it brings me this comfort because I know Jesus has put me there. And I know that he is there with me. And I know that he's going to give me himself. And I'm going to be more like him. And there's something about it, I don't know, it gives me this joy and this comfort. And Lord, I'm not asking for anything. But I know that when he does that, I just see the work of God. I see it. And so, yes, sorry.
She she's more mature than I am. I don't love suffering and don't feel joy when it comes. I put on my helmet and chin strap and buckle up, and Lord help us endure.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
And so, how did you? So you considered that's the way you considered it joy, is what you're? Because that is a tough one. How do you consider that joy? How does?
Because I know Jesus is there. I wrote this blog one time that the one thing that I have no regrets. I have nothing that I wished had been different about being in the middle of the valley except for this. I wished I'd cherished the presence of God more. Because there is something so sweet. And he said it. He said that when you are alone, when you are in suffering. I ran a race last, was it 2 weeks ago? I don't remember. Anyway, I ran a half marathon. And I was running this race.
Because she loves suffering, so she runs.
And my knee just happened to be, for this, it started hurting the week before, and it hurt from mile 3 to mile 30. Like, it hurt. And I'm running, and I'm thinking, this is suffering. This is like suffering. Because this is the thing about suffering, is that people can cheer you on. People can give you water. They can give you money. They can give you food. They can tell you can do it. They can inspire you. They can do all of that. But the only one who can run that race is you. And the only one who can really be with you in the middle of your sorrow is Jesus. People can surround you and all, but it's the sweetness and the presence of God is, to me, a joy. It really is. Now, do I think that I'm like, yes, please, Lord, let me suffer? I don't mean it that way. I don't mean that. I just mean that when it comes, I trust that the Lord has put me there. If I trust that God rules and reigns over all, when he gets the job he wants, when I have 7 healthy children, when my health is good, then I have to trust he rules and reigns over all when I'm sick, or when somebody dies, or when he loses his job. If he rules and reigns over this, then he has to rule and reign over that. And so he's good in both. And he's present in both. And we can trust him in both. So that's what I mean by the joy, is that I don't sit there and be like, this can't be God. This has to be. I know it is. I know that he has put me there. What did Spurgeon say is that had there been any other state that was better for you, the Lord himself would have put you there. And I have to trust him in both.
Yeah, it really is. The man of sorrows draws you near, who's acquainted with every grief. And it is a sweet place. We love comfort. We love peace. But he loves Jesus in us more.
That's right.
And it is the gift.
And I do pray for everybody. Like, I say that it's not a club that I want anybody to be part of. Like, I'm not sitting here thinking I think everybody should suffer to be like Jesus. I said my best friend, she loves and trusts Jesus so much. And for whatever reason, the Lord hasn't seen fit to put her in a life of the valley. And maybe that's not what he's doing in her, and that's okay. But I will say this, if you live long enough, you will suffer. You will have hard things. We do not get out of this life. John 16:33. In this world, you will have trouble. Fear not, I have overcome the world. So we won't get out of this life without suffering. It'll happen. Even if you have friends who are Mary Poppins, one day they will have something.
And they're going to know who to call. Second thing is suffering affects each spouse differently. And so sometimes suffering is a sort of mutual impact. It's a trial for the marriage. But a lot of times the trial is one or the other. Me losing job, her going through cancer. And so there's the impact of the suffering, but then there's the effect of the suffering in the marriage. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how that takes place. And then also just then there's this institution or this covenant of the marriage itself that is impacted by the suffering. So there's the personal impacts that are different, and then there's the marriage relationship that is being impacted. So when I was on the couch looking for jobs in the...
There's nothing worse than a man without a job. Let me just say that.
It's a pathetic
It's
sight.
hard to look at, y'all. Hard to look at. Some of you may know. Some of you wives may know.
Hitting refresh on the job websites. Okay, I know I checked 30 minutes ago, but surely somebody posted something. Trying to go to another website, trying to find new websites, just trying to find anybody that might be looking for anything that I might be able to do.
This is before Southern?
Yes, this is before Southern. Yeah, so there's this place that I'm just feeling helpless as a man. My great delight is to provide for my family, and I have this clock ticking where the money runs out, the mortgage is still due, and the kids still intend to eat, and they would like to, and so that pressure just mounts almost by the moment, because I know how long it takes for a job to come to fruition, at least in my world, and I'm watching that drift away, and so that's where I am, and the temptation is to really sort of cocoon up in that, and then she's on the outside sort of looking in, but she's also feeling this because the wife's orientation to her husband is such that she carries the burden with him, but it's in a different way. So you said how pathetic it looked. I don't know if you had any thoughts about how that felt.
Well, you don't know what to do, and I think that is so. I think that when you're in a marriage, that sometimes if one spouse is suffering something, you both do suffer together, but like one is like you're kind of not always even. Does that make sense? So like when he's down, like I'm trying to encourage him. I'm thinking of other job opportunities.
She's thought of some very creative ones.
Yes, like corrections officer. Can you see that? I'd be a better corrections officer than he would. But just thinking of trying to help. I'm getting food. Like food helps, right? Food helps men. Like, and I'm trying.
All I can think about is how much the food cost and how many more meals do we have left.
So being an encouragement to your spouse when they're suffering, because honestly, I could just sit down with him on the couch and look as pathetic as he did, but that's not serving him or serving anyone else. I'm like, okay, he's struggling right now to trust in Jesus. So guess what? I gotta remind him, because we're married and we're one, and we got into this to serve Jesus. We decided that this was that for God's glory, and that we're gonna stay married, and not getting grumpy with him or mad with him, but trying to be an encouragement to him in the middle of that, and even lying a little, like it's gonna be all right, it's gonna be okay, we're
Spring
gonna
is
be
coming.
okay,
Yeah.
or even saying, you know what, even if we have to move in with my mom,
Which
I'm
is
not
like
gonna-
the kiss of death, right? On any kind of like, that's exactly where I saw my life headed. Moving in.
I'm not
with
gonna
your
be
mom.
mad. Like, I'm not gonna be mad. I'm not gonna be, we're in this together. Like, he quit his job without another job because he's so moral, and he didn't wanna, and he told the elders ahead of time, instead of just waiting, because he wanted to give them time. So I love him for that. And I'm like, we're in this together. So guess what? If we gotta move in with my mom and I gotta go work at Chick-fil-A, I mean, that's what we're gonna do. It's gonna be okay. Like, we're gonna be okay, right?
I'll say one of the difficult things about being a husband, so she is my helpmate, and so she enters into my suffering, and so when things are going poorly, it's there's a battle inside, knowing, okay, do I share every part of where I'm struggling? Do I draw her into every muck and mire of where I am in my head, or do I be judicious in some things? But we have had just this, every marriage is different, we have had just this sort of unflinching commitment that we are going to be 100% honest about what's going on. We're just going to share it all. Sometimes I felt incredibly guilty for that, because what I was sharing in terms of either what I'd heard from someone, what I didn't hear from someone, what I was dealing with, felt like a burden that I could just tough it up. But she just has always been more disrupted by not knowing than knowing, and so it just kind of flows. Now, she doesn't play by the same set of rules she expects me to play by, because she waited weeks to tell me about the lump she found, and even in that issue with the job, one of the things that led to the end of that job was my fellow elders circulating a list of complaints about me on email, collecting them, printing them out, and then putting them in an envelope with her name and address on it and mailing it to her so that she could know all of their complaints about my leadership weaknesses. And she didn't tell me about that. So she doesn't play by the same set of rules.
Are you kidding? Tell him about it. He might have ended up in the hospital. Like, that one was, I don't think you ever read it to this day.
I haven't, no, I haven't.
But that's you got to talk about that as a pastor. I'm a lawyer, so I don't understand. I'm not elder boards. as a pastor, to go through the tough things you guys have gone through, where you're literally serving God, and then people let you down. Like when you were next to that man, I can't believe it didn't go through your head what had happened to you at that other church too. It has to constantly go through your head, because you're literally, it's not just like one job they said, one guy said go, it's the whole congregation sometimes or something. So it has to affect the whole thing. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Well-
it's just amazing what you go through. as
It
a
is-
pastor.
it is amazing, yeah.
Pastor's wife.
There is an extraordinary burden to the ministry that they don't talk much about in seminary, but you see it. You just think yours will be different. But no, the reality is we're following Jesus in this, and so we're recognizing that this is part of what he endured. This is far from what I'm doing. Is far from what he did. So you have both the model and the sustaining grace to do it.
I also said that the church that we were in before Louisville, that experience was harder than cancer for me, personally. And the day he talks about standing outside that van was also the same day that we got an 8-page letter from one of the former elders saying the reason that these things were happening to our family was because of his sin.
Wow.
Which is very interesting. And just a little background, there was not any, it was just a disagreement. He followed a 25-year term pastor who brought him in, who then refused to leave. So that was what we were dealing with. It wasn't like it was this big whatever. And they didn't want his leadership, but they also didn't want him to leave. So when he finally said he was leaving, and he asked for a severance, they wouldn't give it to him because they wanted him to stay. And they thought they could strong arm him into staying with money. And well, they don't know him. And he wouldn't do it. And so it was such a confusing, difficult time. So, but I will be honest, it was harder than cancer. There was more pain associated with that experience. I mean, when we had Phineas, our last born, the elders' wives wouldn't even speak to me. And I hadn't done anything. Like I was just his wife. These were older women who I had known since I was 16 years old, who I had been in ministry with, and decided because they didn't like the direction that he wanted to go, they wouldn't even speak to me or my children. Like how, and the church was growing. Like the church was growing. It had doubled in size since we got there. The people were excited. They were devastated when we left. And you know what? But if you have a leadership team that doesn't want to lead with you, what do you do? But it was hard. It was really hard. Do you?
So 7 kids.
Yes.
In the midst of all this. I'd imagine that there is a level of loss that your children experience. And I don't know if you're going to get into this later on. I know it's specifically just suffering in marriage, but it's hard to be married as long as you guys have with 7 children, and that not weigh in on your marriage. So I've got 4 kids. I can only imagine if there was a level of loss, even half is what you guys have had, that their experience would affect me and my wife's relationship. So I didn't know if you guys are going to speak on that later. If so, then
Well,
I apologize.
I think we'll just go there because we're going to quickly run out of time, and these are things we do want to talk about. So the nature of the impact individually, the nature of the impact on the marriage, the nature of the impact on the family. One of the things that we made commitments to in terms of our marriage and our children was to try to keep things as normal as possible and to try to provide opportunities for continued growth, because we didn't anticipate suffering would last forever. We wanted to come out on the other side of the valley with something to show for this. We knew Jesus was doing his work. We felt like our part was trying to manage. I mean, they obviously the kids know something's not right. I remember the first Christmas when she was sick in 2010. We were trying to figure out, okay, how can we just delight in our children? Let's just, the cloud's going to be there, but we're not going to act like the cloud's going to be there. We're just going to just delight. We got little kids, they love Christmas. We're going to spend every penny we can find to get them good gifts. And we're going to have a Christmas that for one day is not going to be about cancer. And so we let them get up as early as they wanted to that morning. and boy, can they get up early. And when did we start that morning? It was
4:30.
Yeah.
But remember, this was our first Christmas. Also, we had no family in town. This is the first time we've ever done this.
Yeah.
So 4:30 in the morning, and it was great. But by 10 o'clock in the morning, it felt like 4 in the afternoon. Like it was, and we were like, because we were sad too. I mean, it wasn't just that,
Yeah.
you know, we were tired. We were also sad.
So we had all kinds of fun and festivities and celebrated, and the presents and the enthusiasm, and honestly, there's medicine in that. To hear your kids' delight, to hear some normal sounds, to hear them, see them be happy and cheerful in the midst of whatever's going on, can kind of remove, at least for a moment, the sting of what's going on. But yeah, we got to 4 in the afternoon, and we're staring at each other on the couch going, good night, when is this day going to be over? How much more Hallmark Christmas movie time can we have, or HGTV or whatever, because it was exhausting. But try to create these little parentheses of normalcy in life. And even now, as I'm walking through with a church member who's going through suffering or struggles, I'll encourage them, hey, try to do this, just because you can tend to fixate on the suffering. You can tend to just drill in, introverted, self-focused. This is all there is in the world is suffering, and if you do that, then you have lost sight of the eternal picture and what God is doing. So the next 2 sections are going to address some of those things. Suffering is the opportunity to look beyond yourself, and suffering is an opportunity to look beyond a crisis. So let's talk about those 2 things.
Also, to answer your question, yes, we did lose things with our children. Like, I feel like, especially with my younger 3, I lost about 5 years of that season that I had with my other children. And it was sad. Like, it was sad for a long time. Like, I would think about that because I was sick. And in fact, the second time when I was diagnosed, I said I wasn't going to do chemo again. I was done. I didn't want to do it. I had people sending me letters. Yes, you are. You're going to. And he would say, you have. I'm not doing it because I'd been sick. And I was like, I don't. If I'm dying, because the second time I was diagnosed, they gave me a 20% chance of survival. And I'm like, if I'm dying, I'm not going out like this. Like, I just don't want my children to live. Like, is this what they're going to remember? And we were having family devotions one night, and people were praying and people were begging, and I was like, I'm not doing it. And Scott said something, and one of our children said something, and everybody laughed. And I had 2 children sitting next to me on the couch, and we all burst out laughing. And I just heard, what you believe about God, that's between you and God, but I just heard, a sick mom is better than no mom. And it flipped the switch for me. And I was like, okay. And that's the truth, is that it's okay that I'm sick, and it's okay that there's loss, and there's okay that we're going to miss out on things, because guess what? That's all a part of God's sovereign plan too. And it all builds something into our children. And I look at my children now, and you know what? They have compassion for people that are going through hard things. They have understanding. They have toughness and a understanding of suffering that I think some people live their whole lives and don't have. Like, they really do. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't. But yes, there is loss, but something else is gained in that loss as well. So.
Yeah, there, absolutely. We, one of the things when we came to Louisville, we were homeschooling, which is its own feat to homeschool that many kids with small children. But when she got sick, it became clear that that isn't going to be able to continue, and I've got to not miss a day of work. Remember, that was my commitment. And so I was driving home from the seminary one day, and I had been driving by this Christian school, and I kept looking at it thinking, looks like a safe place. I just pulled in the parking lot, and I went into the office, asked to speak to the principal. Who are you? You don't know me. I just have a request, and I live right around the corner. My house is not even 2 miles from here. Could I speak to the principal? And sure. So I said, you don't know me, but we just moved here, and we got 7 kids. My wife just got diagnosed with cancer.
And we're broke.
And we broke. I know this is a private Christian school. I used to be a private Christian school principal. I know how this works. I can't pay you anything, but we need a place. Is there any chance that you guys could take our kids in? And on the spot, He said yes. He said, yeah, we'll take him in. And so our school-age children were enrolled in a Christian school. So that wasn't ideal. It wasn't the best opportunity for our kids. It actually intensified some of the sense of loss. But it also gave them something that we couldn't provide.
Sure.
So we had to figure out ways, creative ways to continue our role, which goes back to that looking beyond, what do we want to happen beyond this? When we come out of this, where will we be? How will everyone have what they need? How will kids be educated? How will marriage be intact? There were many days when she was in bed with chemo. Let me say this, and relatively, there were very few days that she was actually in bed because she kept forcing herself out of it. But there are some days when it would overwhelm her. And I would stand and watch her and in bed and moaning and the sickness and the pain, and realize that she was somewhere I wasn't. That there was a place that the Lord had kind of brought her into this place, but that I could be there and I could be a constant presence and I could take care of our kids and I could make sure that as much as I could, that things were going well until she came out of that foggy place. And you mentioned the other day just about how you were seen through that fog even.
So we told our kids the truth. Well, he did, because he's the truthful guy, like whatever. So he basically told our kids that night, the day after Thanksgiving, that I had cancer. And when they said, is she going to die? He said she might.
Let's pray.
Let's just not. So, in fact, my one son, he was 10 at the time, and he told me when he was about 13, he said, when Dad told us that, he said, it was the worst news I'd ever heard in my life, and I wanted to throw myself on the floor and cry. It's like, gosh, this kid. So he told them the truth, but we also shielded them from things. So like when I was really, like I never let my kids see me sick. They never saw me. They did not see me in bed. They did not see me throwing up. They did not see me. In fact, one time I was sitting on the couch, our daughter Grace, who is firecracker to this day, but my hat, I wore a hat. I did not wear wigs because my kids did not like them. So you have to take some cues here, right? They said didn't look like you, so I would wear wraps or whatever, and so I had a hat on and it slipped up, and Grace was 3 or 4, and she looked at me and she goes, Mama, I don't want to look at your bald head, pull your hat down. And so but it's that, so they did not see me in those situations. And we have stories of like when my counts were really low, and our son Jonathan, he was 5 at the time, he had gotten sick, and he said to me, Mommy, can I sit next to you if I don't touch you? And I'm like, I mean, we had hand sanitizer machines on the, just all the things. But the thing is this, is that when you are going through something, when Scott said that it's true, you need to look at where you want to be. Because if it becomes all about this, you don't build for the future of your marriage. So you have to, like even when you talk to your friends, if all I'm going to talk to you about is my cancer, and I mean, this went on for 5 years. I mean, can you imagine having a relationship and basically all we talk about and all we live about and all we think about is this suffering or this hard thing we're going through? You're not building anything at that point. You're just sitting. You're just sitting in the pit together, like, right? And not that you're not trusting God, but you have to think about the future. So we when he got home from work, it's how was the day? What's going on? What happened? Who did you talk to? What did you, like it was the vision that we are going to be married after this. And I want it to be good.
Yeah.
I want it to be as good as it was before. I want it to be better, actually. But I want to keep building what we have. I want to keep building our marriage. So, like, date nights. Like, I was sick. When I say I was sick, that even when I was feeling good, nothing was good. But we could go to a movie, and I could sit in the movie. I couldn't eat any popcorn, but I could sit in the movie, and we would go, and we would sit in the movie, or we would go to dinner, and I would take one bite, and like just making ourselves do normal things, even with our kids. I mean, I remember one time I was really in a bad place. I just had a treatment, and I was in a bad mood. I didn't feel good. I was miserable. I was in sweatpants, big sweatpants, Ugg boots, a hat. I mean, I looked like, and I'd been that way for 3 days. No joke. I don't think I'd showered. He's like, there's a home show downtown, and I think we should go. And I was like, I'm not going. And he's like, I think it would be good. I think you need to do this. I was like, look at me. And he's like, nobody cares. And I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. What is that going to do? How good is that going to be? Well, that man made me go. And I'm sludging around this thing looking like I'm homeless. And it was good. It was good because it's something we used to do together. And we went and did it, and it kind of pulled, like, okay, wait a minute. It's not just me. It's not just my thing. We're married. We got to keep going. And so we did those things for our children, too. Like, so when things were, we still went to the mall. We still did the things that if it was all about this, you lose relationship. I think you do, and you don't build, and you don't continue on, and your friendships and all of that. I think it really does move you forward.
Just looking for things that point to a future.
Yes.
What are we going to do to the house? What do we want to fix? Where do we want to live? Where do we want our kids to be? Just forward-looking from the sense of the life that we're living, and really, and this is down there on letter F, suffering and protecting and building your marriage. She is exemplary. Mary is exemplary in the things that she did. When she says she forces herself into duty, she wasn't just like, I've got to get up and make food, or I've got to get up and clean the house. It was, I've got to be a wife and a mother. And that sense of devotion was extraordinary, to be able to say, well, this is what needs to happen for our marriage to flourish. This is what needs to happen for our kids to flourish. This is what needs to happen for this to be something later. And I have told men many times, and I'll say it again here, every husband should have to seriously consider what life would be like without his wife from the standpoint of loss, because it gives you a deep and abiding sense of gratitude for everything that she is. And there are still, if I wake up, I generally do wake up before she does, but if I wake up before she does and I look over at her, this happened just this week, and see her sleeping there, I thank the Lord she's here. She is here in my bed, and this is the greatest woman I've ever known, and I love her more than anything else, and she's here. I can reach out and touch her. I can talk to her. She can listen to me. I can listen to her, and it is a gift. And it causes you to cherish things that would have been taken for granted. And I'm sure were taken for granted before seasons of suffering. So that's an indescribable gift of suffering in marriage, that I have a devotion to her that has intensified because of it, and a delight in her that is greater than ever before. So when we recite those vows, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, sickness and in health, until death, we don't think seriously about those when we exchange those. Certainly don't think seriously about those when that honeymoon phase is going on. But when those things do come in, sickness and health, the sickness rather, the worse, the poorer, you have to make a determination what the value system is going to be here. And if the value system was equated to health and better and richer, then you are in trouble. And you've got to reorient. What are the eternal things that God is doing? And that's where some of these aspects of gratefulness I put there too are better than one from Ecclesiastes. Stronger, bearing with the weaknesses of the weaker from Romans 15. Keeping habits and patterns. It gets disrupted, absolutely. But there were values you set up before suffering came in that you maintain. This is the way we said we were going to live our life. This is the way we said we were going to live in marriage. This is the way we said we're going to parent. We don't get a pass in suffering that says you're no longer required to do that. Ephesians 5 doesn't cease to apply. In fact, if anything, it intensifies in its clarity when it comes to how.
I think that's true. You don't get a pass. You don't get to say, well, I'm having a hard time, so I can just cast these things aside. And I think that there's a tendency to want to do that. I think there's a tendency to put it on pause and I think that's not just with suffering. I think that's with other things. When hard things come, or when things, you don't get a pass. You don't get to stop. You don't get to slow down. You don't get to just say, well, those things don't matter anymore. We made a commitment. We decided how we wanted to raise our family, how we wanted to be married, and it didn't look the same in some ways during suffering but we still fought for that, and we fought hard for it. And the one thing I will say is, though, when you're in the middle of something, look outside yourself. And that's really hard to do because you feel like you just have to get to the next day. And I remember when I went through cancer the first time, I did all the things, but the one thing I didn't see is how he was suffering. Does that make sense? Like couldn't see it. And right after I was diagnosed the second time, I remember looking across the room at him. It was just this, and I saw his face. And I understood, that his sorrow was deep. But I'd never seen it before. And maybe because he didn't show me. I mean, I knew he was sad. I knew it was hard, but there was just this look. And it was almost like the whole time before, it kind of brought it all into perspective. And it changed me in such an interesting way. I was still doing all the things, but it gave me such an affection and compassion. And I realized that he is suffering too. That it's not me. It's not just about me. And that he feels this great sorrow and burden. And it was really life-giving for me personally. And I also think that things about your marriage, like intimacy and other things, don't put them aside. Fight. Do what you have to do, because it is still building. Even if it feels yucky, even if it feels like you're there but not there, you're still building something. You don't get to walk away from it. You don't get to put a pause on it. Who would want to put a pause on if we put a pause on our marriage or on the principles behind our marriage for 5 years, what would that look like after?
That's why most marriages fail in suffering.
Because they do. I think they say, okay, we've just got to do this, and this is all we've got to do. Well, it's not all you got to do. You got to keep going and keep pushing. And we used to say to each other when we first got married, we said it for years, that he would say, "You're better than I deserve," and I would say he was better than I deserve. And we would say it all the time. And we meant it. We really did. But we really mean it now. And I look at him and I think he is so much better than I ever deserved. And he is so much more than I could have ever anticipated. And you know what? It's not because he's turned into a different person. It's because the Lord has grown us and he's grown my heart, and I see him different. I see him better than I saw him the day we got married. And it's a sweet thing.
Yeah, it really is sweet. We think about Hebrews 12, and that Jesus, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross. Mm-hmm. And in that we see this model and goal for suffering. We look at what's to come and endure the suffering now. Now there's clearly an eternal aspect to that. That's what that verse speaks to most poignantly. But even in the temporal, we are looking at what the goal was, to have a God-glorifying marriage, to have children that love Jesus, and to still use all the principles, the Deuteronomy 6 aspect of, we're going to show you where God's at work, and show you how his word applies here. Even when I tell my kids that, mom might die, I'm trying to teach them that this is what we do in response to that. This is how we pray that she will live. This is how we have faith to trust that what he's doing is good. This is how we walk along the way here in this place that God has put us. So helping people see that this isn't it. That's it out there. And how do we aim for that out there and work towards it? And then just the last thing here, and this is probably the greatest gift. It is the greatest gift of suffering, which is why one can actually anticipate suffering with a certain amount of enthusiasm. Suffering is just this sweet gift of God himself in a way that we don't seem to be able to enjoy it apart from it. To view it as a divine appointment from a good and caring God to draw near to himself and give us the gift of himself. Mary has told many people she would not wish cancer on anyone, but she would wish that people would know the intimacy with Jesus and the power of the gospel that she learned through answer. And that would be true from my perspective as well. There's a sweetness of the presence of God that is unparalleled. We have just a couple minutes left. Are there any other questions that you would like to ask? We tried to weave the story in that made it a little bit disoriented in some places. Yes?
Do you mind sharing what happened since your cancer diagnosis and the fact that you're standing here?
And I'm alive.
Yeah. She's here. Yeah.
I am 10 years since my last diagnosis, which is really good. All my scans have been clear. My doctors all say it's not if, it's when, but we're just, it's not been when, so we're good. So right now I'm clear, and which is good.
Yeah, one of our children, our oldest, second oldest son, is the first to get married last year, so we were able to have our first wedding, and
What?
you were able to be there.
I was able to be there.
And so
So I never prayed that God would spare my life, which is such a weird thing. I don't know why. I think I just.
Listen, I'm just going to be real with you. This family
You
without
can see
her,
the difference in our personality here.
this family without her is a disaster. It's an unmitigated disaster. Children go join gangs and do drugs and do terrible things. The husband ends up in the St. Johns River. There's just a lot of things that go badly without her. And so, yes, I beg God for her life. To this day, I beg God for her life. And I think my prayer's been answered the way I wanted it to be answered, because she is here.
I asked God if He would give me more time. So I didn't ask for my life, I just asked for more time. So what's significant about that is that every milestone we have, I see it as God's answered prayer to me. And our son Noah, our fourth born, graduated high school this year. And we took a picture, and I said the significance is that he was going into first grade when I was first diagnosed, and I'm seeing, all right, graduate high school. And so every significant, like weddings and college graduations and all those things, I feel like that's just God answering just this prayer I had. Just give me more time. Lord, will you just give me more time? And really, that's all of our prayer, because we're all going to die, right? Mm-hmm. So. And He has, and He's been so faithful and good. And you know what? I cherish every minute of it. And I'm not the one saying that I'm tired of this life, or I don't like getting old, or whatever. Bring it all. You want to make me old? Make me old.
Amen.
And so it gives you a different
You
perspective.
do cherish everything in
Really
a
do.
much greater degree. Someone else? Yes?
Just, so now your kids are older, at least all of them are, but
Yes.
the top end are moving out.
Yes.
As they reflect back, what are stories that they have? And not necessarily like their love towards you guys or how they see your marriage, although that would be prevalent for you guys to speak on. How do they see their relationship with the Lord, and how you guys looking forward in your marriage growing? Because your marriage is the testimony of the gospel to them. So do they view your marriage and how your marriage is stronger now in the transition through the suffering as they're getting married? How does that echo through them choosing their wives?
You want to talk about Isaac and the dance? I don't know if either one of us can tell it this morning.
So Isaac,
He's the one that got buried in May.
we danced to, what song was it? I can't remember.
I have to believe.
I Have to Believe. And everybody's
Rita
like, that's
Springer.
the weirdest song to dance to. And the reason we danced to that song is because it's still Isaac's story that I have to believe that he's faithful, and I have to believe, and that's the story with him and with our kids. And when I was dancing with him, everybody also asked me what I talked to him about. And what I talked to him about was about how his dad has loved me in every stage, and in every place, and in every valley, and at every weight, at every sorrow, in every surgery, and everything, that he has loved me faithfully. And that is his example. And he said, I know, Mom, I see it. And I said, I want you to love Ashley like your dad has loved me. And he said, I promise I will. And it was the sweetest thing. And I also told him if he ever did anything to her, we would all beat him up. And I meant that too, and he knew I meant it. But there is this sense, it was funny, when I was running before he got married, I had run 7 miles, and I walked in, and I was like, he goes, "Are you all right?" I was like, "My hips bother me." This was about a month before I got married. And he said, "That's you, Mom." He said, "You're always pushing, you're always driving, because you're the real goat." And it actually made me cry, because he actually has been our hardest child. He's the child I thought would end up in jail, for real. And yet, to see God's faithfulness in his life, and to see him trust in Jesus, and to see him have compassion, and to see him be actually just the best husband to this woman, and to love her, is such a testament and a testimony. So,
And I'll just end with this. He came over to the house the day before the wedding, and I was trying to get a lot of work done, had my laptop, and just piled on, and he's just hanging out, and I'm recognizing this is last day, before he gets married, and he goes out, get the basketball, start shooting hoops in the backyard, and I'm sitting there looking at the laptop going, this is a moment, this is an opportunity to go play basketball with my son, and I don't know what I would have chosen, before all of this, but after, I knew exactly that's done. I'm going to play basketball. And I think just seizing those precious moments are incredible realities of suffering. So, sorry about the blubbering idiots who were chosen to lead this session. Thank you so much for your attention, and we hope you've been helpful in something.